Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Pod Theory. I'm your host, Jason Cercone, and today we're going to talk about 5 ways to add value to your brand with a podcast. The brands that are leading the pack in today's noisy, competitive, crowded market are the ones that understand the power of leading with value. There are many organizations that are sales first and sales only and haven't caught on that people just don't respond to that approach as strongly as they used to. Today's consumer is much more informed than years past because they have the means of finding out a ton of information about anything they want to invest in. Reviews, recommendations from their peers, videos, podcasts, you name it. It's all at your fingertips. Essentially, there is never a reason to make a purchase of any kind without gathering as much data as you need to ensure it will be a good one. And you don't need some slick salesperson who lays the hard pitch on you and makes you feel guilty. Companies still doing that today come off as shady. There's no reason to have a secretive sales process because information is still going to make its way onto the web. People driving the success of brands should constantly be looking for ways to add value to their approach. When consumers are getting value from a brand, be it from their social media campaigns, their website, their blogs, their videos, their newsletters, their podcasts, they find themselves much more attached to said brand than those who just yell at them and tell them to buy their stuff. There is a lot you can give away to your consumers that will build their loyalty with your brand. You might feel like you should be charging for that information, but that will all come in due time. Giving consumers answers to their problems and entertaining content to consume brings them closer to becoming a customer. If you aren't willing to provide that value on the front end, people are going to keep you at arm's length and instead will find a brand that does provide them with that front end value. In case you didn't know, a podcast is a great vehicle for driving value from your brand to consumers. Your listeners can learn a lot from you because you have a lot to offer. Whenever they learn something, their trust meter ticks up. The more they learn, the more they trust. And when it comes time to invest in what you offer, they'll turn to you because you've already brought a ton of value to their lives through your podcast. To do this, you want to position your podcast as a catalyst that drives brand loyalty. Here are 5 ways you can add value to your brand with a podcast. Number 1, give your audience an inside look at your brand. Your podcast can serve as a behind-the-scenes tour of what's happening at your company. Transparency is what it's all about. Listeners will develop a deeper connection if you're willing to tell them how the sausage is made. Now, I'm not talking about giving away the recipe to the most secret of the secret sauces, but sharing stories of what's happening at your company as you develop new technology, come up with creative entrees, find smarter ways for people to prepare for retirement, whatever your brand does. The more you can provide a backstage pass to your audience, the deeper their connection with you and your brand will be, thus leading to increased business. Number 2, introduce innovations and solutions on your podcast first. Whatever you're doing at your brand is special for a reason, and people are following you because they see that. They're waiting for the next big thing, and maybe you're the brand that's going to deliver it. So, use your podcast as the first platform where you share those developments. This turns your podcast into must-listen destination content. If people want to hear about the new product you just released or how you found a new way to split a piece of the atom that you already split, they have to come to your podcast first to hear all about it. Number 3, get listeners familiar with the people who drive your brand. I talked about how a thorough, well-crafted podcast can bring you more warm leads back on episode 102 of Pod Theory. And a big factor in that equation is familiarizing your audience with the personalities that make your brand tick. Every time you produce a new podcast episode, you have an opportunity to bring someone from your company onto the podcast to participate in the discussion. If they bring their A game to the podcast, people will begin to connect directly with those individuals. And when the time comes that they take action and contact you, they'll already have a good idea of who they're going to work with. If you think about it, your podcast is the ultimate icebreaker. A platform that eliminates that early uncertainty a person may have in a brand before they get to know someone associated with it. Number 4, include customers and audience members in your podcast content. Your podcast is a great place to share case studies and talk about experience current customers have had working with your brand. You can even go as far as to bring your customers and audience members onto your show to be part of the production. To me, that adds an extra layer of customer experience comparable to a band that brings you on stage to help them perform their signature song. Remember, it's all about showcasing how much you value your audience, and it doesn't get much better than including them on the podcast that help them establish loyalty with your brand in the first place. And number 5, establish credibility in your industry. In the eyes of your customers and audience, as well as competitors and colleagues in your space, you want to be seen as the authority and the thought leader. Of course, every brand in your space will be jockeying for that title, and the unofficial coronation as number 1 will be pretty subjective. But if you're not striving for that distinction in every facet of your approach, you're doing it wrong. With your brand podcast, the stage is yours to bring that knowledge to the forefront. Those who hear it will respect what you have to say, or they may disagree. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone is entitled to believe what they want, but don't hold back because you feel your stance may piss someone off. Face it, no matter what your stance is, it's going to piss someone off. That's the world we live in. But being a thought leader in your niche means putting the opinions you strongly believe in out there and standing behind them sink or swim. Your podcast is your pulpit. Use it wisely. Lead with value. It's what you should be thinking about the moment your feet hit the floor in the morning. Your brand stands a far better chance of gaining traction and growing significantly if you're focused on how you'll bring value to your audience's lives each and every day. I firmly believe this approach will deliver results tenfold in the very near future for you and your brand. And that's going to do it for episode 109 of Pod Theory, but before I go, as has become tradition here on Pod Theory, it's time, once again, for Pod Deck Pandemonium. Pod Theory is sponsored by Pod Decks, and if you don't realize how awesome Pod Decks are, you need awesome lessons. Pod Decks are designed to spark conversation on any podcast and make your interviews fun and engaging. As a listener of Pod Theory, you can save 10% off any order of physical Pod Deck products when you visit poddecks.com today. Use promo code PODTHEORY at checkout, and that 10% will go right back in your pocket for other fun purchases down the road. So Pod Deck Pandemonium is me putting myself on the spot by randomly selecting one card from one of my pod decks and talking about it right here on the show. For this week's installment, I've turned to my Would You Rather deck for the first time, so this could get pretty interesting. I shuffled the deck before I started recording this episode, and I have not looked at the top card. I'm going to pull that now, and we're going to play Pod Deck Pandemonium once again. Here we go. Would you rather fart in an elevator full of strangers or belch loudly while giving an important presentation at work? I think I would go with the latter and belch loudly while giving an important presentation at work. I don't think you can avoid the embarrassment on either one of those scenarios, but if you're among colleagues, you could potentially cover that up with some kind of joke about the breakfast that was served during the meeting. I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to go with the latter on that and say I would rather belch loudly while giving an important presentation at work. See, these are the kind of things you can bring to your podcast. And believe me, these types of things will loosen up your guests and make your podcast production a lot of fun. So check out poddecks.com today. That's PODDECKS.com. Save 10% off your purchase of physical Pod Decks products when you use the promo code PodTheory at checkout. And there you have it. There's another successful installment of Pod Deck Pandemonium in the books. Good talk. I'll see you back here tomorrow. This has been Jason Cercone on Pod Theory.